Chapter 6. Location: Los Angeles, California. Date: June 19th. Treadon Nelson. Treadon carried the 3 cherry-dipped ice cream cones to the table and sat down on the bench next to Ellie and across from Rachel Sampaio. Rachel took a big bite out of the top of her cone, crunching the red crust into the white, soft-serve ice cream. Ellie picked at her cone, breaking off the cherry hard shell and eating it one piece at a time, leaving the ice cream beneath almost untouched. "Have you heard from Jarren?" As soon as Treadon asked the question, he felt the air shift around the 2 girls. Ellie tensed, and he reached for her hand. She let him place his hand against her palm, but she didn't squeeze back. Rachel kept her eyes on the table for a moment too long, and Treadon felt a rush of anticipation. She had news, but he had to let her decide how to tell them. He could read facial expressions and body language with an accuracy that often left people feeling uncomfortable around him. If he let slip, he could tell what they were thinking. It was one of the side effects of his partial bonding with Ellie. The accident had happened 10 years ago, and had left Treadon with abilities he'd never asked for, and Ellie with a deep sense of guilt and regret. Still, Treadon wanted to be the guardian she needed, and to do that, he would have to accept what he was, and all that he could do. They'd had a chance to complete the bond in the cabin in Oregon, but she'd said no. She wasn't ready, and no one should be forced to make a decision like that, surrounded by enemies. But her rejection had hurt. She hadn't been the same since they came back. She seemed more distant, like she was pushing him away. "You have heard from him." Treadon leaned forward, the ice cream melting between the cone and the cherry topping. A single drip left a line from the edge of the cone to his fingertips. He squeezed too hard and the cone cracked in his grip. "You're making a mess." Rachel handed him a bunch of napkins from the dispenser on the table. "You're stalling," he said, using a napkin to keep the ice cream from making it to his elbow, "and I will sit here in a puddle of ice cream until you talk." Rachel laughed. "You know I can't handle chaos. Clean yourself up, and I'll tell you what happened." "Here." Ellie handed Treadon some wet wipes from her purse. "I've been carrying these around ever since our picnic with the jelly sandwiches." "Thanks." Treadon took the napkins and the small pack of wet wipes, tossing the destroyed ice cream cone in the garbage on his way to the bathroom. Someone came out of the bathroom just as he opened the door. The guy kept his head down, bumping into Treadon's shoulder with enough force to knock him back a step. "Excuse you," he called as the guy slipped around the corner without stopping to acknowledge the interaction. The man had a military cut with dark hair and a coat that fit tight on his shoulders. He only had a second, but he was able to glance at the man's neck. No triangle tattoo. Treadon shuddered as he stepped into the bathroom. He washed his hands in the sink, letting the warm water run over his skin, taking deep breaths to try and slow his heart rate. It hadn't been a member of the Triune. There was no one chasing them. If he wanted to be Ellie's guardian, he had to get these small panic attacks under control. He didn't want her to know how weak he was, but he also knew that if he couldn't be strong enough to protect her, she needed someone else. How could he know if he was the right person to be Ellie's guardian? She had the remaining twin dagger still trapped in her arm, a way to steal the life of an immortal angel, or trap a descendant soul in the in-between, never moving on, never fully dying. A weapon the Triune wanted. He needed to help keep Ellie safe and the dagger out of the Triune's grasp, but he could barely keep his hands from shaking under the flow of water. The anxiety built up in him. Flashes of fighting Fenris filled his mind. But they'd won another battle. They'd gotten away. He didn't have to be frightened right now. They were safe in an ice cream shop. It always seemed like his panic attacks hit in the most mundane moments. Treadon dried his hands and stepped out of the bathroom. There was a line at the register, and most of the tables had filled up. The room felt smaller than it had a moment ago, and scenarios of how someone could attack Ellie raced through his mind. "Can you tell us about Jarren in the car?" Treadon asked as he approached the booth where Ellie and Rachel were leaning in, talking about something. They pulled apart too quickly when Treadon spoke, and he had to study the tiles on the floor to hide his annoyance. She still didn't trust him. Not the way she needed to if she wanted to complete the bond and make him her full guardian. "Of course." Rachel stood, pulling the strap of her purse over her shoulder. "I need to get to work anyway. I'll drop you off." Treadon held the door as Rachel and Ellie stepped through. Ellie paused, her head coming up and eyes darting. The clouds were low and heavy, the ocean weather making the air wet, and Treadon's clothes clinged to his body. The day was unusually dark, and he could feel the tingle in the air that had made Ellie stop, a sensation of being watched. Rachel grabbed Ellie's arm and pulled her forward, flipping her hair and pretending to laugh at something Ellie had said. "Don't react. Keep walking." Rachel was an ordinary, but managed to stay more composed than either of them. Treadon let the door swing shut, taking an obvious glance up at the sky so he could scan the parking lot. Other than the couple glaring at him because he was blocking the entrance, no one was watching them. They climbed in Rachel's car, Ellie in front, Treadon pulling his legs to his chest and the back. He'd put on even more weight since football season. Training with Gabe had broadened his shoulders and helped him bulk in all the right places. Too bad his emotional control wasn't as strong as his ability to push through physical challenges. Jarren sent me a message. Rachel put the car into reverse. Her tone was even and professional, like she was sharing information from a source. "He texted you?" Treadon asked. "No." Rachel turned a corner and glanced in her rearview mirror. "He's out of service, and he hasn't charged his phone for a couple of weeks." "He went totally off-grid?" Ellie asked. "Is he afraid some of his father's associates will come after him? Do they think he knows more than he should?" Rachel shook her head. "I don't know how much Jarren knows about XE Energy or what happened there, but that's not what he's worried about." "What did he say?" Ellie asked. Treadon leaned forward an inch. It was all the wiggle room he had in Rachel's small back seat. He'd been waiting for news about Jarren for a while, but Rachel was distracted, glancing in the mirror again and taking a turn a little too sharp. "He found his mom. She's been training him for 3 days." 3 days? That's it? Treadon let out a breath. "He said she was coming to find Adora because she's a liar, and that Gabe is a liar too." "Why would he say that?" Rachel turned left, cutting off a truck and earning a honk. The force of her turn slammed Treadon into the door. Ellie gripped the handle and shot Rachel a sideways glance. "What's going on?" Ellie asked. "We're being followed," Rachel said. "Do you think it's Bachman?" Ellie's voice was tight with tension. She pulled on her seatbelt, loosening it off her shoulders and squeezing the strap until her knuckles turned white. Ellie's reaction wasn't fear. It was anger, a determination to turn and fight the enemy, to stop running. His own reaction was to do whatever it took to stop her, to keep her out of danger. Rachel took a right turn, and then a full U-turn, skidding across the street and cutting off an old lady in a sedan. The woman honked, but Rachel ignored it as she hit the gas. There were 2 people in a green truck. The windows were tinted, and Treadon couldn't see anything other than sunglasses that moved as the heads turned in tandem to follow Rachel's car. That was Jarren-worthy driving. Treadon tried to cover the anxiety in his voice, joking away his tension and pretending that his breath wasn't being squeezed from his chest. "His dad owned a full-size racetrack," Rachel said. Her tension was only visible through the tight grip she kept on the steering wheel and her glances in the rearview mirror. "Jarren and I snuck out more than once to test the cars. Jarren lost to me more times than he won." "They've turned around." Ellie kept her eyes locked on the side mirror. "We are definitely being followed. I would say they might be undercover police cars, except they haven't turned on their lights, and I think they'd have called in for backup by now. Slow down and let them catch up. I'll see if I can get them off our tail." Rachel seemed reluctant, but reduced her driving speed. She kept on the main road as they all watched behind them. The green truck swerved around the old lady they'd cut off. "It can't be Caden Bachman," Treadon said. "First, the SUVs he uses are immaculate, like they've just been professionally detailed. Second, the drivers he uses drive with precision, like robots almost. These guys on our tail are driving like high school kids at a drag race with unfiltered road rage." Ellie put a finger to her forehead. "Something's wrong. I can feel them, but I can't influence whoever is driving that truck." "Are they too far away?" Rachel asked. "No," Ellie said, pressing harder against her temples. "Distance doesn't matter. I can sense that they are there. I just can't reach them. I've never met anyone I can't influence, except for Treadon, but he was just stubborn. I'll take that as a compliment. I guess we're back to losing them the old-fashioned way." Rachel shifted gears and flipped her long hair over her shoulders. "Everyone buckled?" Treadon held onto the door as Rachel accelerated, keeping his head turned so he could watch the progress of the truck following them. It remained stubbornly behind Rachel. They made the same turns, no matter how last minute Rachel made them, and they ran red lights without an incident 3 times. Who were these people? Caden Bachman's men had herded Jarren onto the highway with precise, coordinated movements. The driver behind them showed no indication of trying to force them anywhere. They were only determined to follow them to where they were going. "They're trying to follow us home." Treadon knew which home they wanted to find. His house, with Abigail, and a guardian of angels. If it had been Caden Bachman, he wouldn't need to know where they live. He wanted Ellie, and Ellie was in the car with them. Rachel nodded. "I think so too, but they are hard to shake. I have to give them that." "Who are they?" Ellie asked. It was a question none of them had an answer to. Losing the tail took almost an hour. Rachel weaved in and out of traffic, like the head of a snake. The truck was the body, slithering along behind them, but eventually they were able to get back on the freeway without their new friends. Rachel pulled into Treadon's driveway and leaned back against her seat with a huff. "That was intense. What do you think those guys wanted?" Treadon thought about the way the drivers had followed them, relentlessly, with their non-aggressive movements. Never, during the long car chase, had the drivers attempted to run them off the road or play bumper cars. They had been determined to stay behind them, no matter the cost. Or at least, they don't want only us, or they would have found a way to cut us off. They want something, or someone we're associated with. He reached over the seat and touched Ellie's shoulder. Ellie put her hand on his as she turned and looked at him. Treadon felt the pull of his heart and the drop in his stomach. Every time he felt both the thrill of having her near him and the fear of losing her. Rachel turned off the car and opened the door. We'll have to tell Gabe and Abigail and see what they think. I got the license plate number, and I have a source that can run their plates. Ellie started to unbuckle, but she stopped, the smile dropping off her face. What? Treadon asked. They found us.